Amelia had always been a good girl, quiet, obedient, and careful with her words. Raised in the small, fog-drenched town of Ravenshade, she had learned early on that survival meant knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. Her mother, a seamstress who stitched gowns for the wealthy families on the outskirts of town, often reminded her that honesty was the best policy. But when Amelia found herself standing in Mr. Greaves's antique shop, clutching a tarnished silver watch she knew was worth more than he was offering, she felt the familiar pressure of necessity tighten around her chest. She needed money, badly. College applications were due soon, and though her mother worked long hours, the tuition fees were far beyond their reach. Mr. Greaves, with his crooked nose and calculating eyes, had already dismissed the watch as a cheap imitation. Amelia knew better. She had seen the same design in one of her history books, a rare Victorian timepiece, worth thousands. If she told him the truth, he would either refuse to pay or try to haggle her down even further. So, against every lesson her mother had ever drilled into her, she smiled sweetly and said, "It's just a family heirloom. I don't know much about it." The moment the lie left her lips, the air in the shop shifted. A chill ran down Amelia's spine, and the dim lighting flickered. She blinked, expecting it to be a trick of the failing bulbs, but then she saw her, standing behind Mr. Greaves, her translucent form barely visible through the dust-laden shelves. A woman in a tattered dress, her face gaunt, her eyes hollow. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. Mr. Greaves turned slightly, as if sensing something was wrong, but when he looked over his shoulder, there was nothing there. He frowned at Amelia. "Are you all right, dear?" Amelia nodded, forcing a tight smile. "Yes, fine, just tired." The woman remained, watching her with an expression Amelia couldn't decipher. Then, just as quickly as she had appeared, she vanished. Amelia left the shop in a daze, clutching the meager handful of bills Mr. Greaves had given her. The encounter unsettled her, but she convinced herself it was exhaustion, stress, anything but the truth. After all, ghosts weren't real, not unless you lied. And that was the problem. She had lied, and the moment she did, the dead had seen her. At first, Amelia convinced herself it had been a hallucination, a side effect of stress, fatigue, or perhaps the dim lighting of Mr. Greaves's shop. But as the days passed, the ghosts began to appear more frequently, always in the wake of a lie. It started small, a fib to her mother about finishing her homework, and then there it was again, a figure in the corner of her vision, watching, waiting. The more she lied, the stronger they became. She tried to test it, cautiously at first. When she told a classmate she had finished reading the assigned novel, a pale boy with ink-stained fingers materialized beside her, his lips moving silently as if reciting the words she had never read. When she lied to her teacher about missing a deadline because of a sick relative, a woman draped in mourning black appeared at the back of the classroom, her eyes fixed solely on Amelia. The ghosts never spoke, never moved closer, but their presence was undeniable. The weight of their stares pressed down on her, filling her with a creeping sense of dread. She started avoiding conversations where she might be forced to lie, but it was impossible to navigate life without bending the truth at least once a day. Every time she did, the ghosts multiplied. They lingered in the corners of rooms, in the shadows of alleyways, in the reflections of shop windows. Some were vague, barely more than smudges in the air, while others were terrifyingly clear. Faces twisted in sorrow or rage, eyes hollow and accusing. She stopped sleeping. Every time she closed her eyes, they were there, waiting in the darkness beyond her lids. She would wake up gasping, her sheets soaked in sweat, only to find one of them standing at the foot of her bed, unmoving, unblinking. The worst was the woman in the tattered dress, the one who had first appeared in Mr. Greaves's shop. She seemed to follow Amelia everywhere now, always appearing first, as if she was the one who summoned the others. Amelia tried to tell herself she could stop, that if she simply stopped lying, the ghosts would go away. But the truth was, she didn't know how. Lies had become a reflex, a way to navigate the world without hurting anyone. And now, every lie came with a price. One evening, she stood in front of the cracked mirror in her bathroom, staring at her own reflection. The woman in the tattered dress stood behind her, her expression unreadable. Amelia turned around sharply, but the ghost remained in the mirror, unmoving. That night, she made a decision. She would stop lying, no matter the cost. But as she whispered the vow into the silence of her room, the woman in the tattered dress smiled. Determined to break the cycle, Amelia began researching everything she could about ghosts, curses, and the supernatural. She scoured the internet, searched through old books at the town library, and even visited the dusty archives of the local historical society. Most of what she found was folklore, stories of restless spirits, haunted houses, and curses passed down through generations. But none of it explained why she alone could see the ghosts the moment she lied. Frustrated, she turned to the only person she thought might have answers, Eleanor, the elderly librarian who had helped her find books on local history since she was a child. Amelia found her dusting the shelves in the dimly lit library, her silver hair pulled into a neat bun, her eyes sharp behind thick glasses. "I need to know everything you can tell me about curses," Amelia said, keeping her voice low. "Specifically, ones that involve ghosts appearing when someone lies." Eleanor frowned, adjusting her glasses. "That's a rather specific request. Where did you hear about such a thing?" Amelia hesitated. She wanted to tell the truth, but the thought of another ghost appearing made her stomach churn. I read about it somewhere," she lied. The moment the words left her mouth, a cold shiver ran down her spine. The air in the library grew heavy, and a soft whisper echoed through the aisles. Amelia turned sharply, expecting to see the familiar woman in the tattered dress. But instead, she noticed something else. A book on the highest shelf, its cover worn and faded, suddenly shifting as if disturbed by an unseen force. Eleanor followed her gaze and sighed. "That one," she murmured, reaching for a step stool. I haven't let anyone borrow it in years." She pulled the book down and placed it on the counter. Its cover was embossed with an unfamiliar symbol, an eye encircled by twisting vines. Amelia opened it carefully, revealing brittle pages filled with handwritten notes and sketches of shadowy figures. As she flipped through the pages, a name caught her attention: the Whitmore curse. Eleanor leaned in, her expression unreadable. The Whitmores were one of the founding families of Ravenshade, she explained, but they were known for something else: deceit. They were liars, manipulators, and they built their fortune on betrayal. There were rumors that they made a deal with something unnatural, a spirit that fed on dishonesty. Amelia's breath hitched. What happened to them? Eleanor hesitated. They disappeared, all of them, vanished overnight, leaving behind only their empty mansion on the outskirts of town. Amelia's hands trembled as she continued reading. The book described a curse, one that bound the Whitmore family to a spectral entity that thrived on falsehoods. Every lie they told summoned the dead, and the more they lied, the stronger the ghosts became. Eventually, the spirits consumed them entirely, dragging them into the void. A cold realization settled over Amelia. "This isn't just a legend," she whispered. "It's real." Eleanor studied her carefully. "You've seen them, haven't you?" Amelia nodded, her throat tight. "Every time I lie, they appear." The librarian sighed. "Then you're connected to the Whitmores somehow." Amelia's heart pounded. She had never heard of any Whitmore relatives in her family, but as she looked down at the book, her eyes landed on a name she recognized: Margaret Whitmore. Her grandmother's full name was Margaret Whitmore. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. The curse hadn't ended with the Whitmore family. It had survived through her bloodline, and now it was coming for her. The moment the truth settled in Amelia's mind, the ghosts changed. They no longer lingered in the periphery, watching silently. Now they moved, slowly, deliberately, their hollow eyes locked onto her with something deeper than mere observation. They were aware of her. They were following her. She tried to stay quiet, to avoid speaking at all, but that only made things worse. The silence gave the ghosts more room to press in, their whispers curling around her ears like smoke. Sometimes she could make out fragments of their words: pleas, accusations, warnings. But they always dissolved before she could understand them fully. The woman in the tattered dress was the worst. She no longer waited for Amelia to lie before appearing. Now she was always there, just out of sight, just beyond the edge of her vision. Whenever Amelia turned to look, she would catch a glimpse of her, a flash of pale skin, the flicker of a torn hem, but never long enough to confirm she was real. The town itself seemed to shift in response to Amelia's growing terror. Shadows stretched unnaturally long in the corners of rooms. The air in Ravenshade grew heavier, as if the town itself was holding its breath. Even the people began to change. They spoke in hushed voices when she passed, their eyes darting away as though afraid to meet hers. Then the disappearances began. It started with small things, people failing to show up for work, friends skipping school without explanation. At first, Amelia thought it was coincidence, but soon the absences became impossible to ignore. A boy from her history class vanished overnight, his family claiming they had moved away without telling anyone. A local shopkeeper, who had always greeted Amelia with a warm smile, suddenly stopped opening his store, and when she knocked on the door, there was no answer. One evening, as Amelia walked home from the library, a sudden gust of wind sent a chill down her spine. She turned a corner and found herself face to face with a ghost she hadn't seen before. A young boy, no older than 10, his clothes soaked in mud, his face streaked with dirt. His eyes were wide, pleading. "No," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Not again." Before Amelia could react, the boy's form flickered, and for a brief moment, she saw something behind him, a shadow, massive and shapeless, curling around him like smoke. It reached out, wrapping around his body, and in an instant, he was gone. Amelia stumbled back, her breath coming in short gasps. The street was empty. There was no sign of the boy, no trace of the shadow, but she knew what she had seen. The ghosts weren't just appearing anymore, they were being taken. That night, she sat in her room, clutching her knees to her chest, trying to make sense of it all. The Whitmore curse had been passed down through generations, and now it was feeding on her lies. But if the ghosts were being consumed by the darkness, what did that mean for her? Was she next? The woman in the tattered dress appeared again, standing at the foot of Amelia's bed. This time, she didn't just watch. She stepped forward, her lips parting in a silent whisper. Amelia leaned in, straining to hear. "You're not the first," the ghost finally said, her voice hollow, distant. "And you won't be the last." Then she was gone. Amelia's heart pounded. The curse wasn't just about ghosts, it was about sacrifice. The Whitmores had made a deal, and the price had never been paid in full. Every generation, someone carried the curse forward, feeding it with their lies until they, too, were taken. And now, it was Amelia's turn. Amelia knew she had only one chance to break the curse. The ghosts were growing stronger, feeding off the lies she couldn't seem to stop telling. The woman in the tattered dress had warned her. She wasn't the first, and if she didn't act, she wouldn't be the last. The Whitmore family had vanished into the void, their fates sealed by a bargain struck long ago. But Amelia still had a choice. She returned to the Whitmore estate on the outskirts of Ravenshade, a crumbling relic of the past that had stood abandoned for decades. The gates groaned as she pushed them open, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. The house loomed ahead, its windows dark, its walls sagging under the weight of time. Somewhere inside, she knew, was the answer. The front door creaked as she stepped inside, the silence pressing in around her like a living thing. Dust swirled in the air, disturbed by her presence. The moment she crossed the threshold, the temperature dropped, and the familiar chill of the ghosts wrapped around her. They were already here. The woman in the tattered dress stood at the top of the staircase, her hollow eyes locked onto Amelia. Around her, the other ghosts gathered, faces she had seen in the shadows, in the corners of her vision, in the mirrors she dared not look into. Some were mournful, others angry. All of them were waiting. Amelia swallowed hard and took a step forward. "I know what this is," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I know about the curse, about the deal your family made." The woman tilted her head. "Then you know what must be done." Amelia clenched her fists. "Number, I won't let it take me." The ghosts stirred, their whispers rising in volume. Some reached toward her, their fingers stretching like smoke. The air grew heavier, the darkness pressing in from all sides. "I won't be another Whitmore," she said, forcing the words past the fear tightening her throat. "I won't lie anymore." The woman's expression shifted just slightly, as if surprised. "You think honesty will save you?" Amelia took a deep breath. "Number, I think facing the truth will." She stepped forward, her pulse pounding in her ears. The ghosts parted as she reached the center of the room, where an old tarnished mirror stood against the wall. It was cracked, its surface clouded with age, but she could still see her reflection, pale, wide-eyed, trembling. Behind her, the woman in the tattered dress watched in silence. Amelia raised her chin. "I lied to survive. I lied to protect myself, but I was wrong." Her voice wavered, but she forced herself to continue. "The curse isn't just about lies. It's about shame, about hiding the truth, about letting fear control us." The ghosts flinched as if struck. The air vibrated with their murmurs, the whispers growing louder, more frantic. Amelia stepped closer to the mirror. "I won't run from this anymore." She pressed her palm against the glass. The moment she did, the mirror cracked further, splintering outward in jagged lines. A scream echoed through the house, not from her, but from something deeper, something ancient. The ghosts shrieked, their forms flickering wildly. The woman in the tattered dress reached out, her expression one of sorrow, not rage. Then they were gone. The house shuddered as if exhaling, the oppressive weight lifting from the air. The cold dissipated. The silence returned, but this time it was different, calm, final. Amelia pulled her hand away from the mirror, her breath unsteady. The ghosts were gone. The curse had been broken. But as she turned to leave, she caught one last glimpse of her reflection. In the mirror, the woman in the tattered dress was still watching her, and she was smiling. Amelia left the Whitmore estate with the weight of silence pressing down on her. The ghosts were gone. She could feel it in the air, in the way the wind no longer carried whispers through the trees. The curse had been broken, but the cost of that freedom lingered beneath her skin. She walked home through the empty streets of Ravenshade, the town still cloaked in its usual fog, the sky a dull gray that never seemed to lift. The familiar buildings stood as they always had, but everything felt different now, lighter, yet somehow emptier. The ghosts had been terrifying, but they had also been constant. Now, their absence left a void she hadn't expected. As she reached her house, she hesitated before stepping inside. The moment she crossed the threshold, her mother looked up from her sewing, her eyes narrowing in concern. "Amelia?" she asked gently. "You look different." Amelia forced a smile. "I'm fine," she said, and for once, it was the truth. But even as she spoke, a flicker of movement caught her eye in the hallway mirror. She turned sharply, her breath catching in her throat. Nothing, just her reflection, pale and tired, staring back at her. She exhaled slowly, pressing a hand to the cool glass. The curse was gone. The ghosts were gone. She had faced the truth, and she had survived. And yet, something still lingered. She could still feel it, a faint tug at the edges of her mind, like a thread that had never quite been severed. The woman in the tattered dress had smiled in the mirror. Was it relief, or was it something else? That night, as she lay in bed, she closed her eyes and listened. The silence was complete. No whispers, no shifting shadows, just the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat. And yet, as she drifted into sleep, she swore she heard one last voice, soft, distant, barely more than a breath. "You broke the curse." But the truth always finds a way back.